So if you want to just go back to mingling and connecting, I will just say a brief word. I'm sort of delaying the time a little bit until we're ready to record the whole thing. But I wanted to let you know, for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Jillian Livingston. I have Aspen Real Life. I guess we're good to go. I think that's what that signal was, Michael, I'm not sure. So Aspen Real Life is it's a blog. It's a lifestyle blog, but it's also we do storytelling marketing. So many people come to us to get their word out. We amplify your message. We tell stories on the blog. We have these Aspen Connect events where we invite speakers to come up and share their stories. I have a radio spot on KSBN. I'm working with Greg Albrecht, who's here with KDNK, Dave Mayer in the corners with Aspen Entrepreneurs. We're all trying to connect more to bring us all closer together. I felt like there was a gap missing with people in the Valley not really knowing who each other are, maybe hearing the names but not knowing who they are. And so I'm going to invite the speakers to come up and come get a seat. And we have these lovely gifts underneath, so don't forget to get your gifts with the speakers. And the speakers are Janie Joslin and her daughter Eleanor. So come on over and come grab your seat. And then we have Elise Fitzsimmons, who is our moderator. And I wanted to first and foremost introduce the sponsors. I'm going to hold it together, but I'm overwhelmed by the graciousness of the people that are coming on board that love what we're doing to bring the community closer together. And the more I learn about our sponsors, the more I'm slightly overwhelmed by the fact that they're coming in and what we're creating. It's all happened. Well, it's taken 9 years to get here, but it's all happening really fast now. And the Colorado Audiovisual are one of our sponsors. They come in and they record the events. They're so precious, these events, that we need them recorded so we can share them. These conversations need to be recorded. So Michael Burns is the owner. He's in the back there. Please say hello to him later when you get a chance. I started to announce IO Mounts. They give us these lovely gifts for our speakers at every event. We also want to thank the Caribou Club for being our hosts. They just stepped up and said, yeah, we'll do it, and we're going to give you wine and beer and appetizers. And I don't know why, but from the very beginning, I've wanted to be in the Caribou Club. I do know why, because it's an intimate setting, maybe a little too intimate this evening. There's a lot of you here. But thank you to the Caribou Club. If you're not a member of the Caribou Club yet, you should become one. And they didn't want to come speak, but I'm going to plug them for that. David Portman is in the back. He's with First Bank. I'm amazed. What they're doing for the people of not just in Aspen, but in Denver and throughout the state is more than just banking. They really care. And if you follow our Facebook feed, we're Aspen Real Life everywhere. You'll see all the incredible things they're doing for other people. And I'm going to have David come up and say hello and give a few words, and I'm going to want Kari also to come up after David, and we'll bring everyone in to just speak for a few minutes, and then we'll get the conversation started. So this is David Portman of First Bank. First Bank.
Thanks, Jillian. Well, I'm excited to be here. I wanted to do two things, and none of which is going to be talking about banking. I'm thankful for all of you guys, but I'm relatively new to the Valley. We've been here about a year after 20 years in Colorado, from Steamboat to the Vail Valley, and fortunately, I had this wonderful opportunity a year ago to join our First Bank team in the Roaring Fork Valley. And so first thing is, most people, as I've gone around town over the last year, a lot of people don't even know who we are. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about who we are. We are a community bank founded in Colorado 55 years ago. We've been throughout the state and moved west to this valley 5 or 6 years ago. So by the definition of community bank, we've defined that over the last 55 years. Philanthropy, community stewardship, basic retail banking, mortgages for affordable housing projects, you name it, across the board we've offered those types of services. But what I want to talk about most is some of the charitable giving and philanthropic events that our guys are involved in. So Colorado Gives Day is kind of our big premier community give back event, and hopefully most of you have heard of that by now, but if you haven't, it was the first Tuesday of December, and 9 years ago we created a $1 million investment fund to bring the state together to support all of the nonprofits throughout the state. So this year we raised $35 million for 2,500 organizations throughout the state, and here in our valley there were 41 organizations that participated and about $320,000 raised, and I think that'll continue to grow exponentially year over year. The thing I was probably most excited about, we moved up to Missouri Heights on June 4th, and so shortly thereafter we were displaced from our home for a few days. So I was really passionate about the impact those fires had on all of my neighbors and all of our community members. So about a month ago, we created with Eagle County and the Roaring Fork Fire Authority a $50,000 I'm going to say cost-sharing fire mitigation program, so all of us can help protect our homes better. So anyway, look for us around the community. We're going to keep giving back as much as we can and finding places we can make our impact, and I look forward to meeting you all here, hopefully later tonight. Thank you.
Brian Ward is also a sponsor, and he has Sopris Health and Wellness. If any of you were at our previous events, you may have heard me whining about all my aches and pains. Brian has a hemp-based CBD products that he's going to talk more about, but I will tell you that I've been taking them at night, and I wake up feeling no pain. I'm going to go with no pain. And so I didn't know how good his products were until after he became a sponsor, but I am so happy to have him as a sponsor, and I'll let you know that there's no psychoactive effects in it at all. But he has his products in the back. He's got samples for you, so take some home, try them. He's an amazing guy. I love his business. So here's Brian Ward.
Thanks, Jillian. And thank you, Michelle and Jillian, for allowing us to sponsor this. And thank you, everybody, for coming. Often the advice that you get is start with why. So why did I start Sopris Health and Wellness? Well, when I was a kid, I always liked to help people. I was the kid that sat by the mailbox during the summer and gave the mailman a glass of lemonade as he delivered our mail. And still through this day, if you need a tip on your golf swing, or if you want to tip on skiing or something like that, there's something about seeing somebody light up as a result of helping them. And so when a friend of mine started growing hemp just north of Boulder, Colorado, I started helping him out because I wanted to help him grow his business. And we put together a crop. And it was a very successful crop, and we extracted it that fall and started with our first products. And it was amazing when we actually started handing them out to people, the responses that we were getting. Like, we were changing people's lives. And that's when I knew that we were onto something. It's great to make a sale, being in a business where you sell products, it's always nice. Oh, well, you sold something. But really what lights me up is when people tell me how much that our products have changed their life. The fact that nothing else works for people, and then they discover our products. So that's really why I started Sopris, is to really honestly help people. Now, what a little bit about Sopris, where there's sort of 4 things that I like to talk about. Like, first of all, I would never put my name on anything that I didn't think was the highest quality. So we don't cut any corners. All of our hemp comes from a small single farm. We're not, this isn't mass produced. It's extracted in small batches. We use a patented extraction formula that you won't find anywhere else. And so what we have is a full spectrum, very dark, very rich, very fragrant CBD extract. And we honestly think it's the best that you can find in the market. Secondly, we offer complete, total professionalism and transparency. We'll never sell anything that we can't fulfill. My business card is back there. Feel free to give me a call. We're completely transparent and committed to being professional. Thirdly, CBD can be very expensive for people that have tried that, and we're committed to progressive pricing. So if there's a way that we can help you and you just can't afford it, give me a call. We'll work something out. We're about trying to help as many people as we can, and if it means that we don't make any money, that's fine. And and lastly, we give 5% of our proceeds to charity. We're working on a partnership with Aspen Strong at the moment. Like, we want to support people with mental health issues, because CBD can be great for anxiety, depression, and as Jillian pointed out, sleep. And also we want to get people off of opioids. And CBD is a great way to get off opioids. So come back. We've got all our products back there. We got some literature, got some samples. My card's there. Please stop by and check us out. Thanks.
Maybe that explains why I'm so delusionally happy all the time. So another sponsor is Sue O'Brien of OSC Law and Mediation. Sue and Heather Kramer, who have sister firms. Heather Kramer is also another sponsor of ours. She focuses on, which you might all need one day, but you don't think you do right now, but DUIs and license suspensions. We're lucky to have these people in the Valley. I have never met anyone with a bigger heart than Sue O'Brien. She works so hard for the community, and I'm going to let her tell her story, but she has just started her own firm that specializes in family law and divorce mediation and collaboration. But Sue, come on up and we'll have you say a word or two.
I'm going to be super quick because I know we have speakers. Yes, I'm going to talk about very quickly about two firms. OSC Law and Mediation. I'm the O, and I'm the O'Brien, the O, and my law partner, Emily Simone, who couldn't be here tonight. The two of us have, like 45 years of experience in family law and other probate matters, and we have a firm now. Both of us worked for Alpine Legal, and I'm still of counsel for Alpine Legal, but we work with primarily mediation, some probate work. We do some progressive family law solutions that sort of stay out of the courts and do everything sort of pre-court. So look us up. We've got our business card in the back of the room, and we have a sister firm. We share an office with Heather Kramer. I have her business cards back there, and Heather could not be here tonight, but Heather specializes in, as Jillian just told us, DUI, DWAI, MIP, and license suspensions. So we're sister firms. We're sanctioned by the Supreme Court of Colorado to work sort of next to each other. We share an office. We share resources. So look us up if you need any of those legal advice, and our business cards are in the back of the room. Thank you.
Sorry, but that's what happens when you have so many sponsors. But I'm going to start. We need more, by the way, because I want to do lots and lots more of these events. So Michelle Bryan is here. You can talk to her later about all the different packages we have to promote your business or your special project that you have going on. But the other sponsors we have are Blend Web Marketing. We have a whole new, spanking new website. We busted that out the other night just so we could present it to you all, and it shows you how we focus on letting you know the fun events that are happening weekly. We're all about the fun. Michelle Cardamone, you hopefully saw her picture when you were coming in, her photograph. She's the best photographer in the world, portrait photography. She's my sister also. And we have Dragonfly June Kombucha. Jacqueline is here. She's over there giving a wave. I'm sorry I have to rush things along, but please go say hello to Jacqueline. She can come up after the conversation and let us know more about her delicious kombucha. Let's see if I've forgotten anyone. Now I have to refer to my notes so I don't forget anyone. Oh, thank you. I'm going to down that. Edible Aspen, I'm sorry that their magazine is going to be, I don't know when they're going to not be producing their next issue, but they came in and we've been working together as partners, and then KD&K as well, and Mindset Consulting consulting company, Adriana Lejos, has been helping us to strategize better. And also Lily Bart, if you don't have their cards, you need to. They're the ones that did that really cool logo. And then one more thing. I am delusionally happy, and there is a reason for it. There is somebody here who's very special to me who came into my life recently. We've been working together very hard to really help me align my vision so that I'm much more clear on where I'm heading. It's Aspen DeQ over there. I'm going to be sharing her with you at our next event, which tentatively is scheduled March 21st. It's only going to be 30 tickets. So make sure that you are on our list to get our VIP invites, but I have gone through a major transformation because I solely attribute it to Aspen, and Michelle also has helped a lot. So, okay, moving forward, I'm going to have everyone come sit down, if you will, and I'm going to introduce you to our moderator, Elise, and she's going to introduce Janie and Eleanor and their project, their podcast that they're working on. But Elise is the publisher and co-founder of Unearthed Women. It's the first travel media company created by women for women and their allies. Hailing from Chicago, Elise fell in love with Aspen instantly while studying at the University of Colorado Boulder after graduating with a degree in sociology in 2011. Elise drove over the pass for the last time as a tourist and was ready to put down her roots, yearning for the elusive qualifier of Aspen Local, which many of us, I think, can carry that name at this point. Over the past 8 years in the Valley, Elise has developed a deep sense of connection with those in the Roaring Fork, most notably through her role as membership director at Aspen Public Radio. She's an avid reader, an audiophile who loves travel, international cuisine, deep space, and like every good Aspenite, all things outside. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Elise to get started. I'm going to see if there's any way we can put the light on them so we can see a little better. But enjoy the conversation. And
I wanted to say thank you so much to Jillian for organizing this, to all of the sponsors for supporting, for both Eleanor and Janie for sharing their stories, and most importantly, to all of you for sharing this journey with us. Without further ado, we have Janie and Eleanor. So Eleanor Bennett is an independent podcast producer and radio journalist. She was captivated by the medium while interning at Aspen Public Radio. Whoop, whoop. Aspen Public Radio ties. From there, she moved to New York, where she covered issues of climate justice and women's empowerment for Sirius XM Radio. Eleanor recently finished a project interviewing hundreds of New Yorkers from all walks of life on an audiovisual installation by photographer and street artist JR, which will be featured in the Brooklyn Museum next fall. Her latest endeavor is Questions I've Never Asked, a new podcast about getting to know the interior life of her mother, Janie Joslyn Bennett. The story begins with Janie's childhood, growing up in the cattle station alongside the Pigeon Jar Aboriginal community in the remote Australian outback. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And with no exaggeration, Janie Joslyn Bennett has lived a unique life. The daughter of an Australian film star and a rugged pioneering cattleman, she was raised in Australia's remote outback to the sister of 3 older brothers. Growing up, her primary playmates were children of the Pigeon Jar tribe who live on the vast land with her family and whose ancient languages she spoke fluently. She was destined for an unorthodox journey. Janie won an Australian equestrian championship, beating a field of men decades older. Congratulations, that's so exciting. Trained international polo ponies and eventually traded her little egg yellow car to buy a round-the-world airplane ticket. As a just-arrived 20-year-old in New York City, she landed a job with Fashion Week icon Farron Milas. Later in Aspen, she worked with acclaimed National Geographic photographers and launched Photographers Aspen, their international photo agency. Along the way, she was a contributing force behind the Oscar-winning film Born into Brothels, among other global photo projects. She has lived and raised her daughter here in Aspen alongside her husband, former Aspen Mayor John Bennett. And if you know Janie really, really well, she might give you a nip of her homemade gin, or even someday take you mushrooming in the wild. Let's talk later.
Only a nip.
So without further ado, thank you everyone, and let's get started. All right. Eleanor, your podcast is entitled Questions I've Never Asked. Can you tell us about how you chose that name and what inspired you to create a podcast about your mother's life?
Yes, I can. So it really started about a year and a half ago. A good childhood friend and an Australian businessman and cattleman came to visit us, and he listened to one of my podcasts I'd made for my old job at SiriusXM, and he said, "You've got to make a podcast about your mother. It would be so good. She's lived such a rich, remarkable life." And I think we both looked at each other and we thought he'd forget the next morning because we'd had a lot of margaritas. But he didn't. And he said, "I want to kickstart this project. I want to give you the small funds to start out, and then you can take it from there." And so, a lot of time went by when we just sort of sat on the idea. And I think we sat down a few months after that and started doing some preliminary interviews, dipping our toes in the water. Is this something we really want to do? And yeah, I don't know how much more I can talk about how the name came to be.
Well, sure, yeah, we can get to that. But Janie, were you open to this idea even after so many margaritas? Like once you sobered up the next morning, was it still a good idea?
I honestly have to say had to work with the openness of this idea. I initially was probably slightly reluctant and also hoping our friend had way too many margaritas to remember his idea. But I am so committed to this project, and for two reasons. One is I lost my father recently, and he was just the greatest storyteller and also led a very unique life. But he really only told stories with a glass of rum in his hand and a larger audience. I worked with him, trying to get his stories, and it was just very difficult. And then it was suddenly just too late. So the second reason is I think it's just such an honor to have your child who's got her own career and life and so much out there to work on, and she has chosen to work with her mother.
That's so wonderful. Janie, as you mentioned in your bio, you grew up on your father's remote cattle ranch. It's called a cattle station in Australia, and it was 300 miles from the closest town. Can you share with us a few tales of your upbringing?
Yeah, sure. I'll try and keep it short. But first of all, we lived in a very, very remote part of Australia, and it certainly was extremely isolated, but more from a geographical sense than really from a community sense. We shared the land with close to 90 Indigenous Australian people called the Pitjantjatjara. They still are today, a very tight family group. And I was lucky enough to be raised bilingual amongst the people, and they were truly family. And that really went both ways. And so, growing up, first of all, with three older brothers, thankfully they're not in the room tonight, but, I really do feel like, it was survival on a lot of levels. And one of the things I've really learned is I was probably a lot tougher. Through working with this podcast, I realized how tough I had to be to survive with a lot of male energy. And anyway, so that's the real stories. I think for me, reflecting back, are so many. Certainly with my family, but with the Aboriginal people, it was truly a gift to be raised with one of the oldest culture living on this planet. Their language and their culture has existed for 50,000 years, according to latest DNA reports. And I just can't think of any greater privilege than being able to be raised in a close environment with such a unique, resilient culture.
didn't tell a story. Do you want to? Should we come back to that?
No, go ahead. Tell a story. Horses,
I didn't mean to
maybe.
put you on the spot. Did you tell the one about the goanna?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell a short, terrifying story. I think I have to tell other stories here, but okay. So we, as children, one of the things that we did a lot, the minute we got out of our classroom, which was basically centered around a two-way radio. My call sign was 8 Juliet Whiskey. It was actually, and I do not drink whiskey, by the way, but. The minute we could get out of our classroom, we were in the wild. And I mean, you know, some people probably called us very feral, but whatever it was, we truly lived a extremely free, exciting life. And we were out the door with our Aboriginal friends. We hunted, and gathered everything from kangaroo to large monitor lizards to witchetty grubs, which were the staple of their diet. But anyway, the short story I have is that one day we were actually off looking for kangaroo, and we were walking along the base of this beautiful red rock escarpment, and out of nowhere, this really enormous monitor lizard called a Parenti came flying towards us. And I was with a group of women. We were, we just knew we were going to catch something. And suddenly we were this huge lizard came flying for us. There was a lot of screaming and yelling. And that monitor lizard, which was as tall as I was, literally ran up my legs. And it clawed, and it was hanging on. And the Aboriginal women were, we're all just so terrified. They typically would run up a tree, but I think they probably thought I was some little tree. But and the women were trying to claw this thing off me, but it had hold of me. I mean, the claws on these things, you've seen a picture over there in the slideshow. Anyway, eventually we got the lizard off, and he ran away. But we were just a sort of a screaming mess of women, older women and younger women. And, anyway, in their culture, they say, you are marked for life if you have an encounter like that with an animal. So.
In a good way?
So obviously it's a very different upbringing. Was there a period of time when you first realized that your upbringing was different than maybe most Australians?
Yeah, probably two situations I had. One was when I was 6 or 7 years old. My parents came from Sydney, and my mother took me into the Sydney Royal Hospital to visit my cousin who had her tonsils out. And we went into the child's ward, and I got slightly hysterical, apparently, because I couldn't understand why the entire ward was filled with white children. And I said in a very loud voice to my mother, "Why are they all white in here?" And she took a deep breath and took me aside. And, anyway, that's the story goes that way. But the second thing was, I think, boarding school life, which was really my first big break from family and the outback and the remoteness. I just felt, I did finally adapt to boarding school, but it was to be in a situation where you had a high-rise fence, had to wear, huge bloomers and uniforms and yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and all of that business was really a major thing for me to adapt to.
Boarding school must have been quite the departure.
Yes, it definitely was. It definitely was, yeah.
Eleanor, are there any are there any stories, I guess, from your mother's past that you learned through this podcast that you maybe didn't know before, or you now have more clarity about?
There's so many. I think a really big part of this project has become having these deeper conversations that we'd never had together. And I think that was sort of unexpected. Like when we started, we both thought this will be a really lighthearted, all these fun goanna stories, and you have amazing stories from your childhood, and many of them are just super fun and lighthearted. But then we started getting into, I think, the time when your family left the land. So when my mom was 10, and we can talk more about this later, but her family there was the Australian Land Rights Act, and they gave the land back to the Pigeon Jar people. And so her family left, and it was a good thing, like it was an amazing thing, but it also meant you were saying goodbye to all of your friends and your family. And at the same time, I hope it's okay to get into this, but your parents were getting divorced, and your mother died when you were very young. And so that whole era of your life, obviously way before I was born, before you even met Dad, it was a really, it shaped your life, I think, in a really deep and important and tough way. And so, yeah, that's one story that I didn't know. That's like 5 stories, but
A lot of stories that we'll have to talk about after
Yeah.
the whole discussion as
Yeah.
well. Can we go back to before you left, so before the age of 10, and can we speak a little bit about the experiences you had with the Pigeon Jar women and what they were like?
Yes, yeah. The Pigeon Jar women who still live on the land today, and we just recently spent some time with them, were just such a big part of my life. Being the only girl in this family, I was included in all the women's, shenanigans and goings on and hunting and gathering, and they also really focused on teaching me their language. And along with teaching the language, a lot of the customs as well. So these women today, it just stuns me as part of this project going back. They are so strong and so amazing, and I'm really happy to say that a number of them have become acclaimed artists, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about that after this event. It's really a beautiful thing to watch this ancient way of communicating from them, first with their bodies and in the dirt and on the caves, to take this sense of design and interpretation that they have and create most stunning art.
So the Aboriginal people are very much tied to the land. Can you explain some about Dreamtime and Songline, and talk to us about their importance in Aboriginal culture and the importance of place?
Yes, and I thought about this. I actually would like to read some words from Aboriginal people rather than my own interpretation. So, forgive me for reading off my text here, but these are some excerpts from Australian Aboriginal elders on both Dreamtime and the songlines, which is very much a part of their culture. Aboriginal elder Robert Bruffo says, Aboriginal people will always live in their dream time, and their dream time is the space that was around them long ago, at least 50,000 years. The dream time is the moment of creation for us, when our ancestors ran into a half-formed world, singing the names of the mountains, the rivers, and hills, simultaneously bringing them into existence and blazing sacred paths, or what is known as songlines. And between these places, our songs of creation and travel are called dreamings. These are passed down from generation to generation within each of our Aboriginal clans. They serve both historical records of their ancestors' accomplishments and as maps guiding the singing across the desert to sites sacred to their own clans. Many of us say that we follow up the dreaming, a metaphor for following a track. Traversing the dreaming tracks is a way to honor and vivify the great totemic ancestors, and also to quicken one's own spirit, presence, and by extension that of the universe. Lastly, the contemporary author Bruce Chatwin wrote, The ancients sang their way all over the world. They sang the rivers and ranges, the salt pans and the sand dunes. They hunted, ate, danced, killed, and wherever their tracks led, they left a trail of music. They wrapped the whole world in this web of song.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Will you teach us a couple of Pitjantjara words?
You're really on the spot.
Really, it's all about you today.
Nyundo wuro alajudo, ngayelo mogare nyundo wuro. Maybe the easiest word to teach you all is wuro. It's a word that's, there's no direct translation, but it's a word, thank you. It's all good, and you could almost say graceful. The translation of that is, I feel very happy to be here, and I feel very honored to have this family of friends in the room.
It's a great word to learn. Eleanor, you and your mother, your mother and another Valley local mother and daughter pair, you returned to the Outback. Is that them?
Yeah, that's them, Kate and
Perfect
Jody.
timing. You returned when you were young. What was that like for you?
Well, to be completely honest, so I was 10 years old and I was a brat and I was obsessed with my Game Boy Advance and I did not look up from the Game Boy the entire drive. I mean, as my mom said, it's a 300-mile drive from the nearest town, or nearest major town. And I really, when the Game Boy died, I realized how cool it was that I was in this amazing place. And I didn't really know the significance of it at the time. Like, you hadn't gone back. You went back once before since you were 10. So I think like 25 years later or 30 years later was the first time you went home. And that's pretty crazy. So this was the second time my mom had been home, and she was bringing me back because some of the elders had asked her to bring her daughter and her husband, so he needs to come next time. So it was really incredible, and we pulled into this town. I mean, it was pretty wild looking because the government had come in and built all of these cement houses. And the irony of that is that people were not yet, now they live in houses, but at the time they were not down with these like giant cement blocks in the outback where it's 120 degrees. It's just insane to build those, and they didn't want them. And they were sleeping on cots outside in the yards and like using the houses for storage, which I guess was maybe that was helpful. And so it was kind of a weird looking place. And then there's this like tiny general store with kangaroo tails and I don't remember what else. But the people were just, I mean, everybody that you knew from back then came out and greeted you and hugged you, and they were so excited to see me. And I was a very shy 10-year-old, so I was like scared of what was happening, but they were all just so warm and loving and friendly, and I think just extremely excited to see you, because you really were one of their best friends or their child in a lot of ways, and that was really cool. And we camped for about a month, and I'd never camped for a month in that kind of heat. I think I had a little, I was a bit dramatic with the flies and the heat stroke and all of the things, but it was a really incredible time. And the women took us out foraging for maku, which is witchetty grubs. You'll see some of them on here. They're like giant white caterpillars. We ate them. It was crazy. But yeah, I think just for the first time to see this place that was such a big part of your life, and then I'd only heard I mean, I grew up hearing stories about this place, and I never knew really for myself what it was like, and I realized you weren't exaggerating. I think I always thought that there was a little, like, I don't know if you guys have seen the film Big Fish, but I kind of thought there was a little of that happening, and there really isn't. It's dramatic, and it's beautiful, and it's remote. Yeah.
So, Janie, you once mentioned to me that silence is the first language of the Aboriginal people, or at least the ones that you grew up with. Can you explain that concept to the audience?
Yes. In their culture, as children, you're really raised to watch and listen to elders. And it's fine to speak when you're playing and hanging out, but in any kind of cultural situation, the most important thing to do is to sit and listen quietly, not only to the elders, but to the animals, to the environment. And it I guess as a child seemed very straightforward, but in today's world with Game Boys and many other things, to be raised with respect for that is something I truly treasure, and it torments me a little bit too, honestly.
So then, Eleanor, what are some things that you've learned from your mother in observation?
There's a lot of things I've learned from you. I mean, I think one big thing is going into this project, I knew you as my mother, obviously. But what I mean is, like, you were this mother figure to me, and I also knew you as a really good friend. Like, we've always been so close, and I feel so lucky to have that relationship with you. And I knew you as a spontaneous, wild woman that would take me to dip in the river on my way to school, and we were always late for everything. But I think going to the place where you grew up showed me. I mean, the most recent trip we did, which we'll probably talk about later, but we were like talking to an elder who you grew up with, Sammy Dodd, and he said, I think we asked him like about the name Mimily and where that came from, and he was like, oh, well, let me just show you. And so we jumped in the truck, and like we were supposed to be leaving, and we were like, okay. We got in the truck, and then we ended up being obviously very late for getting back to Alice Springs, but it showed me where that comes from. I'm sure it came from a lot of people in your life and a lot of things, but that was definitely Mimily is one of the places where that came from. And I also learned how tough you were, like you just talked about. I think that I didn't know that side of you. You ripped a tree out of the ground when we backed into a mulga tree out there. We'll tell that story later as well. But really, I think you went through a lot at a really young age. And I think it's really, part of this project is to, I read this beautiful piece by this writer, Courtney Martin, recently, and it was called Seeing Our Mothers as People. And she talks about this idea of whether we can really ever truly acknowledge the interior life of a mother. I think it's true for a lot of us, that, or at least for me, that I know you so well, and yet there's so much that I will never be able to see. I feel like it's a conceptual challenge of some kind of like, you're this figure to me. And when I was little, I remember like you would go away to Australia, and I'd be so sad, and I'd be like, why does mom have to go? Or why does dad have to work? Like all these questions that you have when you're little, but they're really important moments, I think, because you're trying to understand, like, how could my mother possibly have a life outside of me? Because I'm also an only child. But it's a big thing, I think. And I'm not, are you not looking at me? I'm not proposing that I could ever fully know you. Like, you're a mystery. But I think that I'm getting to know you better in different ways, and that's very cool.
So you both had the opportunity to go back to Mimily in October. What was the impetus for that trip? What brought you both back there?
So we knew we were doing this podcast, and we hadn't quite figured out what is each episode going to be about, but I knew that Mimily, this community where my mom grew up, is such an important part of her life story, so we had to go there. And I'd been there, but not since I was 10. So we brought the microphone, we packed up the car. We can't really tell anyone you're coming. There's an art center, and they have cell phones and an Instagram, but they don't answer their email, they don't answer their Instagram. It's just kind of like you just drive out, and hopefully people will be there. So we did that in October, as you said, and we got there, and the community was very quiet. We went to look for my mom's childhood friend, Nungolpa, at her house, and she wasn't there. And her daughter, who lives across the street from her, came out and greeted us, and she said, the community's actually mourning right now. Someone has just passed away, and what they call sorry business. Is that right? Yes. But some people are coming out of sorry business, and you can go find them at the general store. So we drove to the general store, and it was kind of like this game of trying to find Mom's friends. And then finally, I remember Lorna, one of your childhood friends, was walking across one of the streets after we'd been looking for an hour and wondering if we should leave, because this is a time of mourning, and we felt like maybe this was it was a bad time to be there. But she was so happy to see you and just came running to the car and gave you a huge hug and said, "You've got to come see my brother and the whole family." And then so we just kind of followed her lead and went to their house, and they were all gathered there, the whole family, and we just hung out with them and sat with them, and we're just trying to gauge, I don't know, like, I think you were just telling stories while we were sitting there. I think that's the thing I realized too. I came in hot with my microphone and was like, I'm going to interview my mom's friends from her childhood. And then I was like, oh, that's not how things work here. Like, they do not, they don't really dislike the microphone, but I think a lot of your friends were just like, let's just tell some stories and hang out, which obviously, like, makes a lot of sense. And yeah, that was really beautiful. And then I think we were sitting there and it had been a couple hours and we heard this really loud wailing sound. And it was the widow of the man who had passed away in the community. And we didn't know his name because you don't say it in this Pigeon Jar community. You don't say the name of someone who's now passed away. And so your friends went to go be with her and comfort her. And so we were like, okay, this is our cue. So we left and we went and found a campsite a little ways away, and we hung out there for a little while. And I think, yeah, it was really incredible to go back as a little bit older, a little bit more grown up of a person, and just see the community again. And I think there's a lot of, yeah, I don't know, it's just so complicated what's happened there, but everybody is still obviously just so happy every time you come back, and to reconnect is beautiful, and the art center is amazing, and there's good and bad, and it's all happening.
Can I say something? Well, just the other thing, Eleanor, is you're part of their story now, and that's what is just really powerful about this project. Is my first journey back after being a mother and having a child was the very last night. Several of the elders came to the campsite and said, you need to bring your child home, and your husband, but your child home. And so for Eleanor to make a second trip is just, they're just as excited to see her as they are to see me.
So, Eleanor, your podcast, the first 3 episodes, each one starts with a question. Can you tell us what those 3 questions are?
Yeah. You have to listen to the podcast for the answers, but you can hear the questions. The questions are sort of stages of my mom's life and questions that I have about them. So the first is the Mimily episode, which is really this question of, I think I already said this, but I feel like the stories I heard growing up were just so wild and magical and almost mythical. And so I really, in this episode, want to explore the full story. So the good, the bad, everything that really was your experience there for the first 10 or 11 years of your life. And that includes going back in time, even before my mom's family lived there, to the history of how, there's just a lot of, in many ways, the cattle station, not your family, but like the cattle station coming there was a white colonial project. The government owned the land and leased it to cattle stations. And so exploring that story in greater depth and like what's happened since, because it was really good that the land was given back, but at the same time, it was not actually given back. It's still owned by the government. And to explore like, why did your family have such a close, good relationship? Because they really did. With the Pigeon Jar people, like what was so unique about that situation? Because there were a lot of cattle stations. You can watch films about this, documentaries about this, read about it. A lot of the cattle stations at that time were not good. Things that were happening were not. Yeah, so they were really messed up.
Yeah,
to say the least.
to say the least. Eleanor, your podcast was originally titled "Questions I Was Afraid to Ask." Were you afraid to ask these questions, or why were you afraid to ask these questions, rather? And how has this project changed your relationship with your mother?
These are big questions. All right. So the original name was Questions I Am Afraid to Ask. And that came from a list of questions in my notebook titled Questions I'm Afraid to Ask My Mother, which grew and grew and grew. I think when we started this project, I thought we'd sit down and we'd just like get into it and talk about all of the the hard stuff first and get that out of the way, and then it would be done, and we would just have really fun stories to tell. And that's not what happened. I think you and I think what I've realized through this is that we are both so close, and yet we're very avoidant of really intense emotional feelings. And so trying to get over that is because we're still making the podcast, is a challenge, but I think it's a meaningful challenge, and I think we're doing it, and it's been really cool. And what was your second question?
Oh, why were you afraid to ask them?
Oh, yeah, I think what I was saying earlier is that I changed the name to questions I've never asked because I thought that the fear part was really dramatic. I'm afraid. It sounded really dramatic. Like, I'm not estranged from you. We don't have this dark family history that nobody knows about. It's not dramatic in that way, but it is hard to have these conversations, and I'm still figuring out why. I think part of it is what I was saying before, that we're in our culture, we're not, or at least I was never taught to have these conversations. Like, these are kind of conversations for like end of life, or, like I don't think we have these very often, especially with our children and our parents. And I think that that's sad, because I think it's so meaningful, and there's so much we have to talk about. And I'm glad we're doing this, and I'm really grateful that you're willing to do this with me.
So then, Janie, what have you learned about your life from the podcast, and how do you feel about Eleanor asking these questions?
I may have touched on it earlier. I think one of the things I really was not aware of until going back in history is I was pretty tough. And I've just going back into these stories and hearing the stories from other people, and the resilience that both my brothers and I had to deal with, a broken marriage and leaving our land, our home, and our place, and our people. I think we have a tendency, certainly from my upbringing, is you pull up your bootstraps and move right along. And it's really a journey, and it's not an easy journey to go back into the things. It was partly a magical, amazing life, but it was also when, it was until it wasn't. And so, let's see, the second part of that was, what was the second part of that question?
Tell a story. No, I'm just joking.
Well, speaking to the toughness, since my daughter hasn't told the story, I will say I did surprise myself on this most recent trip back to Australia. And I can see some really wonderful Australian friends in the audience who might really understand this. So we were late to getting out of the bush, and we really had to get back. We had to return a rental car and get on a plane. And so we went to say, the goodbyes were just so drawn out. And then as we were saying our last goodbye, one of the most amazing elders came, and I asked him, I said, Sammy, where is that soak, a water source that is named after the place, Mimili? And he said, it's over there. Come on, let's go look at it. And I'm like, how far over there? Oh, no, just over there, So I looked at Eleanor. We were already about, a couple of hours late getting out of there. We had a long drive ahead, but there was we had to follow. So he jumped in his truck. We jumped in the rental car. Suddenly we were just going through creek beds and bushes. I could hear the scraping of the trees along the side of the rental car. And he was flying through the bushes. And I just said to Eleanor, we're stopping the car. This is it. We cannot go any further. This car is trashed. I was completely hysterical about, getting back a car that was not supposed to, by the way, be off a paved road. Certainly. And so we stopped the car, and he just flew off. He vanished into the bushes. And I said, Eleanor, he will come back. He will come back. She's like, do you know where we are? And I'm not really. But in any case, he did circle back in this red dust, just flying through the trees. He came back. And I said, Sammy, look at this car. I can't go any further. He got us to jump in his car. That was great. We went to see the soak, and it was actually very, very moving to see this ancient soak that for possibly thousands of years they've been drawing water from this ancient soak. And the other thing was amazing. It was very dry, drought-stricken, yet there were some indigenous plants and medicinal foods all around the soak, which we harvested. And then we went back to my car, and by then we were just, so late. So I got in the car and I turned the engine on and swung the car around, and immediately backed into a mulga tree, which just embedded itself in the rental car, essentially. And I just couldn't believe it. Eleanor, I said, and I thought for a moment, I hoped that it was just sort of nestled against the car. But Eleanor said, Mom, no, the tree is in the car. So I got out of the car, and probably a few words were spoken, and I ran around and I grabbed this tree, which is a solid tree trunk, and I literally put my foot up against the car, and I ripped the tree out of the ground. And out of the corner of my eye, I could see Sammy, the elder, just walking towards us, just in awe of the tree being ripped out of the ground. And then he suddenly had this great big smile, and he said, Janie, good firewood, good firewood. I said, anyway, the rest is history. You have to listen to the podcast to hear what happened, with the rental car.
Thank you both so much for sharing these stories with us. We're coming close to the end of our time. So, Eleanor, as a podcast producer, do you have any recommendations for us?
Oh, yes. Okay. A few of you have heard me talk about this one before, but it's called Bodies. It's by Allison Behringer. She is amazing. And basically, the whole podcast, each episode is one person exploring a medical mystery about their body. A lot of women on there. It's a really good podcast. And she actually talks to her own mother about, why did we never talk about consent and sex and our bodies and all of that. So it's a really cool podcast and very related. And then, should I say one more?
Of course. We would love that.
Conversations I Wish I Had, which is really related to my podcast in a lot of ways. This young woman who I actually know, and we might be able to do a collaboration with her, which would be really cool, when she was 16, her mother passed away, and she realized there were all these conversations she never had with her. So it's very, close to home. And she bought a VW van and set up a recording studio in her van, and she actually travels the country and has people come into the van and record a conversation with someone in their life who is no longer with them, and have a conversation. And those are the podcast, and it's really incredible. She's amazing. Her name's Morgan Brown.
So after all of these stories, we're all incredibly excited to listen to your podcast. How do we go about finding it?
Yes. So it's not out yet. We're still making it. We're going back to Australia in 2 months. But hopefully I'm pitching it around a bunch of networks, and so hoping to get it picked up. So if you know anyone, let me know. And they'll tell me when it needs to be out, but I'm guessing it will come out hopefully in the spring. So, this is all going to happen very quickly. It's soon. And it'll be on Spotify and iTunes and wherever, all the podcast apps.
That's wonderful. Janie, do you have anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, just two very quick things. One, I'd like to just say that an interesting fact from one of my recent trips, I learned Central Australia is now the largest importer of Belgian linen in the world. The Australian Aboriginal art form is on fire, and I just really support the medium. Of course, there's been, there's a lot of controversy over the early contemporary art that was created, but now I think there's just some really great, ethical issues that have been addressed, and there is just extraordinary art being created out there today. and I am happy to share with anyone, just if anyone has any interest in that. And secondly, today I just suddenly thought, Caribou Club. We are going to be in the Caribou Club. In 1992, Carignan Devore and I were involved in a UN-sanctioned commission to celebrate the Year of Indigenous Peoples. And one of the people that Australian Aboriginal, really, she was a national treasure we brought here, was a woman called Thankupi, an extraordinary ceramicist who's no longer with us. But within 24 hours of being in Aspen, Thankupi, the first thing she wanted to do was just get downtown Aspen and check Aspen out. And so one of the first people she ran into was Harley Baldwin. And she had quite a conversation with Harley, and she came home to our household, which we had quite a few people in the house at that time. And I just remember Thankupi saying, that Harley Baldwin, he is quite a guy. So here we are sitting in the Caribou Club. Yeah.
Well, thank you both for sharing your time, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much.
So we have time for just a few questions, and if you have any more questions that we don't cover, just please email them to Jillian at aspenbusinessconnect.com. And we haven't discussed this, but we can possibly send them to Janie and Eleanor and have them answer them and put them on the blog, which is aspenreallife.com. But before I'm going to hand the mic over for questions, I did want to tell you a little bit more about Michelle Cardamone's images, because I was rushing through everything, and then I want Kari to come up, and we're going to do the Heli-Ski giveaway, and then we can all have some more wine and food. But I did want to say that through Janie's photographs from her childhood, one can see the power and impact of documenting time with beautiful imagery. Michelle, her images are really, they create compelling and authentic portraits of individuals and families. And so if you are wanting to capture, not on a podcast, but through photographs, your family, I encourage you to do so and reach out to Michelle, and her business cards are up front. But let's just ask a few questions. We were going to have you all get together and think of questions, but I don't think we have time for that. So I'm going to give you back the mic. Oh, sorry, one more thing. For the recording, we ask that Elise repeat the question so that we can answer them.
I was wondering what Australia or other communities are doing to preserve the culture, the indigenous culture, with everything that's going on in the world and people needing to leave their remote locations for education or other reasons. What is being done to keep the language and the customs alive?
Actually, who's ever answering?
Yeah. Well, and share this, because you could add to this. But that's such a great question, Nancy. And I think, it's a loaded question, and I could sit here for an hour and answer it. But I think one of the key things is that the Land Rights Act in Australia has been super progressive. It took way too long to happen, but it evolved really in the 60s, so way, way too long. But the Australian Aboriginal people now have reclaimed a significant percentage of their land. And this is the greatest thing for retaining their culture. They cannot really survive, keep their stories, keep their language, which comes right out of place, without having the land that they have their history and their lineage on.
And I think,
Go ahead.
Oh, just to be what's being done, I think that the land, of course, but it's also up to the communities. Like, I think for so long we thought, well, the government can come in and help preserve everything, but obviously that doesn't work. And so I think especially Mimili is an amazing example of a community that has just decided this is important and we're going to do this. And that's where the art center came from. It's where the school programs come from, and we can talk later.
Lady in the purple. So the question was, that far out, how do you handle medical emergencies?
Do you want to show her your finger?
Well, I have a story. I chopped the top off my finger here. It's actually a great question. Thank you for asking it. Australia has a very unique system that I think also was launched maybe earlier than the 60s. But anyway, it's called the Royal Flying Doctor Service. We call it the Flying Doctor Service. Drop the Royal. But they are amazing. They have a fleet of planes Australia-wide. They will fly into any remote area and rescue, Australians. And in my case, when I was helping out my mother's cook, we were whipping up some mincemeat for 12 hungry men that are about to come in for lunch. And I decided to stick my hand in the mincemeat. I was 4 years old, and it was one of those old it was not an electric mincer, but the girls were cranking the handle, and when they weren't watching, I stuck my hand in thinking, oh, this will be fun. Well, in any case, I was rescued by by the Royal Flying Doctor Service. My mother, what I remember is her dragging me to the radio. This is how it works. She dragged me to the radio. She had to put in an emergency call sign, and my only real memory, other than I have such a visual of that machine, that mincemeat machine, but my other visual was the radio being drenched in blood. I guess every finger has, I learned this, a little mini artery, whatever. Anyway, that was severed, and there was just blood all over the two-way radio. But the plane arrived, and, I survived.
We have time for one more question. Right here in the front. So the question for Janie is, So the question for Janie is, her mother is a film star, and how did they make it all the way to the Australian outback? What was the impetus for starting the cattle station?
Thank you. So this is the joyful part of the story. My mother was into early, actually very well acclaimed Australian films, and one of them, both were set in what we call the Australian bush, but one of them was set in remote outback Australia. It was produced by Ealing Studios in London, incredible cinematography. She was the child star in the movie, and the movie basically was probably equivalent to, sort of a Lonesome Dove story, right? What's the Texas story of the big cattle drive? Lonesome Dove, right? Oh, thank you. I'm married to a Texan. God, I got to get that right. Okay, so anyway, it's the film, iconic Australian film about Australia moving all the livestock from the northern coast of Australia, which was unprotected in World War II, and driving them south. And so it's the largest herd of cattle ever driven in Australian history, possibly in the world. In fact, I'm sure it was. And it was based on a true story, but the film itself was actually set up as propaganda for World War II. And listen to the podcast for the rest. So my mother was in this film. My father actually studied film in Sydney at school, and he. This film, I think for a lot of young Australian men, it just really captured outback Australia. And a lot of Australian men just wanted to go out there, even urban, men raised in an urban environment. He saw this film, and he actually wrote to the director. The director wrote back he had all these questions, how the film was made, and probably asked about, how did, who the cute girl was. And the director actually wrote back a 3-page letter explaining how they, or, answering all these questions about how the film was made and in this extreme location, et cetera, et cetera. So wind the clock forward. Let's see, so my mother was 13 when she was in that film. So let's see, 13 to 23. Okay, so 10 years. My father came back to Sydney. He'd been working in the outback, inspired by this film. He came back to Sydney. It was, a holiday, I don't know, around Christmas time. He got on the midnight tram alone, which surprises me, but he did tell me that. And he got on the midnight tram to go home, and my mother was sitting across the tram, right across the aisle from him with her date. And what he told me, not long before he died, he said under his breath, "That is one lucky bastard." So little did he know, 4 nights later, he was invited to a party in Sydney by my mother's best friend, who's an amazing Australian historian, and in walked my mother. And it was, from what I've heard, it was love at first sight. And they were married within a year, and she moved to the outback.
They started a cattle station.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you, Janie and Eleanor, for sharing your stories.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for coming. Jacqueline, did you want to come up and say a word about your kombucha? I hope you all got a chance to taste the kombucha. So delicious. I'm going to have her say a word, and then please stay in touch with all of us and enjoy the wine. We're going to try and do a promo video for Majestic Heli Ski so you can get a feel for what one of you is going to win tonight. And so we're going to try and get that going. And then I would love for Kari to come up as well and get everyone really excited. I think it's probably dumping outside, or at least it's supposed to, so we can all get excited. I think you have to come over here for or you can use that mic too. This is Jacqueline.
Hi, everyone. I'll be super brief. I'm Jacqueline, and I have Dragonfly June kombucha. And I have a little stand right around the corner, so feel free to come taste. A lot of you don't even know what kombucha is, but June kombucha is a little bit different than normal kombucha. Kombucha is a probiotic tea, and it's really delicious. Most of it is made with black tea and sugar. We make ours with green tea and local Western Slope Colorado honey. We use all organic ingredients, and we are committed to working with local Colorado honey farmers to help support our local bee populations. I'm happy to talk to you more about it. I have samples around the corner. We're available at Carl's Pharmacy Clerks Market, soon at City Market, at all of your Ski Co restaurants. So when you're out there enjoying the snow tomorrow, check us out. And thank you. Yeah, and thanks for Jillian. Thank you, Jillian.
Yeah, we always love to have Jacqueline's kombucha here because many of us don't want the alcohol for some reason. So it's really nice to have that alternative. And I wanted to just give a special thanks to Elise, Eleanor, and Janie. We spent a lot of time together putting this all together, and it's so nice for me to be able to provide a platform for you to share your story, and I'm really excited. But when the podcast gets released, you can be sure that I will be promoting that all over the place. So we'll make sure, and we'll also send an email to all of you that came tonight so you can see the link. So that's a promise. But okay, Kari, are you around to come talk? Oh, here you are. We're gonna have her talk, and then we're gonna watch the promo, and then the drum roll will happen, and Kari's gonna pick from. Make sure everybody put their card into the bowl. I'll get you the bowl.
Where's the bowl? I'm not sure where the bowl is, but I think Jillian's going to figure that out for us. Here's the business card bowl. If you don't have your business card in here, you should put it in there now. So my name is Kari Rowley. I live in Elgibel, and I am the GM for Majestic Heli Ski. The owner, Njord Rhoda, is from Glenwood Springs, and he was a military helicopter pilot as well as a ski guide. And he decided to turn his two passions into a business, and he's done very well at it. And we are Majestic Heli Ski. We have been, this will be our 7th year in business up in the Chugach Mountains of Alaska. We are 2.5 hours from Anchorage. You fly to Anchorage and we take care of everything else. So we are an all-inclusive type heli ski package. We have the most amazing terrain you've ever seen in your life. It's Colorado times 100, I like to say. It's absolutely beautiful. We have 2 million acres of skiable terrain. We have a remote lodge. Nobody else is skiing there really except us. It's an amazing experience. We offer 5-star dining. Lodging is amazing. We have a very unique Alaskan lodge. All of our packages are all inclusive, so you get yourself to Anchorage, and we pick you up at the lodge, pick you up at the airport, take you to the lodge, feed you, you ski, you have a great time. We have all the amenities you need to have the most amazing experience of your life. So tonight we're going to give away a package for one person to come up and stay with us for 1 night and ski 2 days. That is worth $3,000. So if you don't have your business card in yet, right now.
So the mountains here, where we are, in the Chugach Mountains of Alaska, there's no place like it. Fly up to 7,000, 8,000 feet to beautiful, perfect, preserved snow, untracked. There's nothing like it. Snow and skiing in these mountains, it's really indescribable. You just got to be here. You just got to know that you're in for something unique, and that's just the first step, is just going for it. And you'll be pleasantly surprised with what we make happen. Our guests having their expectations be changed once they get their boots on snow and click into their skis or strap into their snowboard. They realize they can do it. And a lot of people build their confidence just after the first 2 turns. Anyone can be out here and soak in these mountains. The moment you finish your first run, all of your questions are answered. Right? And now you know. Life doesn't just revolve around skiing powder. It's about an overall experience here. So, we dig into good food, we sip really good wine, and just look at the mountains and enjoy each other's company. The sense of community is often lost in the modern world, I think. So just coming up here and being able to connect with people through the mountains, through skiing, through exercise, it's fantastic. What else can get you more happy? I've guided hundreds of people here now. A lot of our guests are first-time heli skiers, which is great, because you open this big door that changes you forever. Whether it's a first time in a helicopter or a first time backcountry skiing, being up here is incredible. It's incredible. And we get to just facilitate that on a daily basis. There's no better job than that.
Thank you. I'm glad that video worked. I just want to say we love Roaring Fork Valley community. We hire a lot of people here that come up and work for us. And in fact, I am in desperate need of an entry-level chef for this season. So if anyone knows anyone, please let me know. But we give to the community. We donated to AVSC this year. We've donated to Basalt Education Foundation for years. We love Aspen. We love the Roaring Fork Valley. So if anyone ever wants to come skiing with us, please just tell me you're from here. We offer discounts for locals. We love our community. We want you guys to experience what we experience up there because it's really, really special. So whoever wins this is going to be super excited. But I do want to say thank you to Jillian and Aspen Connect. And thank you to Jamie and Eleanor. It was a great, great talk. Thank you all. And I don't know who's drawing, but maybe Jillian will draw it.
Is Axel still here? I
Yeah,
don't know
maybe
if he's still
maybe
here.
some sort of child should do this.
He's
Is there a
probably
child
gone.
around?
Wait, did you put your business card in? No, I'm kidding. I think he's gone. But here, well, I don't know. Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it.
Okay, yeah.
But
I'd
thank
rather
you,
not do it
Kari.
because I don't.
Yeah, no. But I'm just once again, thank you so much for doing this. I mean, with 80, or actually it's probably about 90 to 95 people in the room tonight, the odds are pretty dang good, especially since not everybody put their business cards in. So, and the speakers, don't forget your gifts from IOMONS. You're going to love these stands. They're awesome. So, okay, ready? Is there a drum roll anywhere? Cynthia Calvin, licensed psychologist, executive coach, International Coach Federation. Here, congratulations. And you have a year to book it, so you need to go talk to Kari, and you're a lucky gal. Yeah. Are you gonna do that? Are you gonna? Okay, good. Thank you all so much for coming. Make sure that I have your email so we'll send you more invites. Please spread the word about Aspen Connect and go check out aspenreallife.com because there's a lot of really fun stories on there. And I think the bar is turning into a cash bar at 6, so go get your drink.